A chance encounter on a cold morning. The sun had barely begun its slow ascent, casting a dim golden hue over the city streets. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp pavement and distant coffee from a nearby cafe. Jason Carter sat up slowly, wincing as the sharp ache in his lower back reminded him of another restless night. The thin mattress beneath him did little to offer comfort, but he had long stopped expecting anything better. Beside him, his 6-year-old daughter, Sky, was curled up in a tight ball, her small body wrapped in a frayed blanket that had seen better days. Her soft, even breaths were the only sign of peace in a life that had been anything but easy. Jason watched her for a moment, his heart heavy with both love and guilt. She deserved so much more than this, a real home, warm meals, stability, but he had nothing left to give. The shelter was quiet except for the occasional snore and the rustle of someone shifting in their sleep. It wasn't the worst place they had stayed, but it wasn't home. Home had once been a modest 2-bedroom apartment, filled with laughter, bedtime stories, and the sweet scent of Sky's favorite strawberry pancakes. But those days felt like a distant dream now. He ran a rough hand through his short brown hair and took a deep breath, pushing the memories aside. Today was a new day. A chance, no matter how small, to make things better. Jason reached for their bag, a faded backpack that contained the last remnants of their old life. A couple of changes of clothes, a toothbrush, and a crumpled photograph of Sky's mother. His fingers hesitated over the picture, but he didn't pull it out. Not today. Instead, he grabbed the last granola bar they had, splitting it in half. He placed one piece on a napkin beside Sky and pocketed the other. Hunger was nothing new to him. He had long since learned to ignore the gnawing emptiness in his stomach, saving whatever little food they had for his daughter. Sky stirred, her long lashes fluttering before her warm brown eyes opened. She blinked up at him sleepily. "Daddy," she murmured. Jason smiled, leaning down to brush a stray curl from her face. "I'm here, Peanut." "Morning, sunshine." She yawned, rubbing her tiny fists against her eyes before sitting up. The blanket slipped off her shoulders, and Jason instinctively pulled it back over her, trying to keep her warm against the morning chill. Her eyes fell on the granola bar piece. "Is this all we have left?" Jason hesitated, then nodded. He didn't like lying to her. Sky was smart, too smart sometimes. She saw through his reassurances more often than he liked to admit. She picked up the piece and looked at it thoughtfully before breaking it in two again. "Here, Daddy," she said, holding out half of her portion. A lump formed in Jason's throat. He should refuse, tell her he wasn't hungry, but he also knew that refusing would only make her worry. Instead, he took it with a grateful smile and popped it into his mouth. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said. She grinned, munching on her own piece. "Maybe today will be a lucky day," she said between bites. Jason nodded, though deep down, he wasn't sure if luck was something they had anymore. But he couldn't afford to let her see his doubts. "Maybe it will be," he agreed. A day of uncertainty. By the time they left the shelter, the city had woken up. Cars honked in the distance, and people in business suits rushed past, their heads buried in their phones. Jason pulled his jacket tighter around himself, holding Sky's small hand in his own as they walked. "Where are we going today, Daddy?" she asked. Jason glanced down at her. He hated that she had to ask, that she never knew what the day would bring. "Let's see if I can find some work," he said. Finding work had been hard ever since he lost his job at the factory. Too many places required experience he didn't have or wouldn't give him a chance because of his situation. But he had to try. They walked for blocks, stopping at a few places where Jason inquired about odd jobs. Each time, he was met with the same response: "Sorry, we're not hiring." By midday, Jason was exhausted. His feet ached, and his stomach felt hollow. Sky squeezed his hand as they sat on a bench near a gas station. "Don't worry, Daddy. Something good will happen," she said with the unshakable optimism only a child could have. Jason forced a smile. "You always say that. And I'm always right," she giggled. Before he could respond, the sound of a loud pop echoed from the street. They turned just in time to see a sleek, black SUV jerk to the side of the road, its front tire completely flat. A woman stepped out of the driver's seat, visibly frustrated. She was in her late 30s, dressed in an expensive-looking coat, with dark brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She muttered something under her breath, pulling out her phone. Jason watched as she frowned at the screen. No doubt she was calling for help, but in a city like this, it could take a while for roadside assistance to arrive. Without thinking, Jason stood. "Stay here, Peanut," he said. Sky nodded, watching as he approached the woman. "Need some help?" he asked. The woman turned, clearly surprised. Her expression was guarded at first, her eyes scanning him quickly, probably noticing the worn jacket and tired face. Yeah, she admitted. "My tire blew, and I was about to call for assistance, but," she sighed. "I don't know how long it'll take." Jason nodded. "I can change it for you if you have a spare." She hesitated, then nodded. "I think I do." He followed her to the back of the SUV as she opened the trunk, revealing a spare tire. Jason rolled up his sleeves. "This won't take long." As he worked, Sky wandered over, watching him curiously. The woman glanced down at her, then at Jason. "Is she yours?" Jason glanced up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Yeah. That's my little girl." The woman studied Sky for a moment, then offered a small smile. "She's adorable." Sky beamed. "Thank you, lady." Jason chuckled. "Her name's Sky." The woman nodded. "I'm Evelyn." Jason didn't recognize the name, but something about her seemed familiar, like he had seen her somewhere before. He shook off the thought and focused on the tire. 15 minutes later, he was done. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back. "There you go. Good as new." Evelyn looked at the tire, then at him. "That was fast. You really know what you're doing." Jason shrugged. "Used to work at a factory. Fixed machines all the time. Cars aren't much different." Evelyn pulled out her wallet. "Let me pay you for your time." Jason shook his head. "No need. Just happy to help." She studied him again, this time with more interest. "You sure?" "Positive." Evelyn hesitated. Then, instead of offering money, she said, "Do you have a job right now?" Jason stiffened slightly. "Not at the moment." Evelyn tapped her chin. "Would you be interested in one?" Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea who this woman really was or what she did, but something told him this chance encounter was about to change everything. Sky tugged at his sleeve. "See, Daddy? I told you something good would happen." Jason looked at Evelyn, unsure whether to believe in fate, but for the first time in a long time, hope flickered inside him. A job offer that changed everything. Jason stood frozen for a moment, processing Evelyn's words. A job? His mind raced with questions. What kind of job? Why would a complete stranger offer him one? And more importantly, was this real? Sky beamed up at him, her small hand gripping his tightly. "See, Daddy? I told you something good would happen." Jason glanced at Evelyn, who was watching him with a mix of curiosity and quiet confidence. He had learned the hard way not to trust offers that seemed too good to be true. Life had been cruel enough to teach him that nothing came without a price. Still, this wasn't an opportunity he could ignore. "You're offering me a job?" he asked cautiously. Evelyn nodded. Yes. But first, let's talk. Are you busy right now? Jason hesitated. He had planned to continue looking for odd jobs, maybe collect enough money for a proper meal for Sky. But this could be bigger than that, something stable, something real. No, he said. We're not busy. Evelyn smiled and gestured toward her SUV. There's a coffee shop a few blocks from here. Let's grab something warm and talk. Jason glanced down at Sky. She was still smiling, hopeful as ever. He knew she hadn't had a proper breakfast, and the thought of a warm meal for her was enough to push his doubts aside. All right, he said. A warm meal and a new beginning. The coffee shop was small but inviting, filled with the rich scent of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries. Jason felt out of place as they stepped inside. His clothes were worn, his boots scuffed from years of hardship. But Sky's eyes lit up as they approached the counter. Order whatever you like, Evelyn said, handing Sky a menu. Sky's eyes widened as she looked up at Jason for approval. He nodded, and she eagerly pointed at a blueberry muffin and a cup of hot chocolate. Jason, not wanting to take advantage, ordered just a black coffee. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. That's all? Jason gave a small smile. Coffee's enough for me. Evelyn didn't push but added a breakfast sandwich to the order for him anyway. When the food arrived, Jason watched as Sky took her first bite of the muffin, her face lighting up with delight. It had been too long since she had something sweet. Evelyn stirred her own coffee, watching them carefully. So, Jason, tell me about yourself. Jason hesitated. He didn't like talking about his past, mostly because it was filled with loss, struggle, and pain. But something about Evelyn made him feel safe. I used to work in a factory, he said finally. Machinery repair. Good job, steady work. Then, one day, they downsized, and I was let go. Evelyn nodded, encouraging him to continue. I had some savings, but it didn't last long. Sky's mother passed away when she was a baby, so it's just been the two of us. I tried finding work, but, he exhaled. Once you're on the streets, it's hard to get back up. Evelyn's gaze softened. I can't imagine how hard that must be. Jason shrugged. I do what I have to. Sky comes first. Always. Sky, unaware of the weight of the conversation, was happily sipping her hot chocolate, swinging her feet beneath the chair. Evelyn smiled at her before turning back to Jason. Well, I have an offer for you. I own a company, a successful one. And I'm in need of a personal driver. Jason blinked. A driver? Yes. It's a busy job. I travel often, attend meetings, and I need someone reliable. Someone I can trust. Jason hesitated. Why me? Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Because I watched you today. You didn't hesitate to help me, even when you had nothing to gain from it. That tells me a lot about your character. I trust my instincts, and my instincts tell me you're someone worth helping. Jason didn't know what to say. A part of him wanted to believe this was fate, that Sky's optimism had finally paid off. But another part of him feared it was too good to be true. What's the catch? He asked. Evelyn chuckled. No catch. Just a job, with fair pay. You'd have a salary, benefits, and a place to stay, if you're interested. Jason's breath caught in his throat. A place to stay? You mean a home? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn nodded. Yes. I have a guest house on my property. It's furnished, safe, and perfect for you and Sky. Jason looked at Sky, who was licking chocolate off her lips, completely unaware of how much their world was about to change. A home. A real home. He swallowed hard, emotions crashing over him. Could he really trust this? Could he risk hoping again? Sky reached for his hand and squeezed it. "Daddy," she said softly, "this is the good thing I told you about." Jason met Evelyn's gaze, searching for any sign of deceit. But all he saw was sincerity. Maybe, just maybe, this was their second chance. He took a deep breath. "When do I start?" Evelyn grinned. "How about right now? Stepping into a new life." Jason had spent so long surviving day to day that he almost didn't know how to process what was happening. A job. A home. Security for Sky. It felt like a dream, one he was afraid to wake up from. As they finished their meal, Evelyn pulled out a sleek black business card and handed it to him. The embossed letters read, "Evelyn Mercer, CEO Mercer Industries." Jason's breath hitched. Mercer Industries. He wasn't big on business news, but even he had heard of the company. They specialized in technology, infrastructure, and investments, a multi-million-dollar corporation. He looked up at her in shock. "You're that Evelyn Mercer?" She smirked. "I was wondering when you'd put that together." Jason shook his head in disbelief. What were the odds that a billionaire businesswoman would be the one he helped today? That she would be the one offering him a lifeline? "Come with me," Evelyn said as she stood. Jason hesitated. Was this really happening? He looked down at Sky, who was staring at him expectantly, waiting for his decision. He nodded. Okay. The drive to a new beginning. Evelyn led them outside to her SUV, the one Jason had just repaired. She handed him the keys. "Go ahead," she said. "You drive." Jason blinked. "Wait, now?" She chuckled. "Consider this your first test." Jason hesitated only a moment before nodding. He had driven plenty before, though it had been a while since he was behind the wheel of a car this expensive. He settled Sky in the back seat, then adjusted the driver's seat and mirrors before starting the engine. As they pulled out onto the street, Evelyn glanced over at him. "How long has it been since you had stable work?" Jason kept his eyes on the road. "Almost 2 years." Evelyn exhaled. "That's a long time to struggle." Jason gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You get used to it. No one should have to." Jason didn't respond. He wasn't used to pity, and he didn't want it. Evelyn directed him toward a part of the city he hadn't seen in years, the wealthier side. As they drove past towering buildings and manicured parks, Sky pressed her face against the window, mesmerized. "Daddy, look at the trees. They have lights on them." Jason smiled. "Yeah, Peanut. Fancy, huh?" Sky giggled, watching as the world outside passed by, a world so different from the one they had been living in. Finally, Evelyn motioned toward a gated property. Jason's jaw nearly dropped as they pulled up to the security checkpoint. The gates, adorned with elegant ironwork, slowly swung open, revealing a massive estate. "This is your house?" he asked in disbelief. Evelyn smiled. "Welcome to my home." Jason followed the long, curved driveway until they reached a breathtaking modern mansion. Large glass windows reflected the afternoon sunlight, and a neatly trimmed garden stretched around the estate. But what really caught Jason's attention was the smaller house tucked away near the side of the property. A cozy-looking guest house, with a porch and a single-car garage. Evelyn pointed toward it. "That's where you and Sky will be staying." Jason swallowed hard. "You're serious about this?" Evelyn nodded. "Go take a look." A home after so long. Jason parked and stepped out, his heart pounding. Sky practically bounced in excitement as they approached the guest house. Evelyn handed him a key. "Go on." Jason unlocked the door, pushing it open. His breath caught. It was perfect. A small but beautiful living room greeted them, with a plush couch and a coffee table. The kitchen, though modest compared to Evelyn's mansion, had brand new appliances. Skye ran ahead, squealing as she explored. "Daddy! There's a bedroom just for me." Jason stepped into the second bedroom, taking in the soft twin bed with pastel blankets. A small stuffed bear sat on the pillow. Skye clutched it to her chest, her eyes filled with wonder. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, watching them. "I had my staff set it up this morning. I hope it's okay." Jason turned to her, overwhelmed. "This is more than okay. I don't even know how to thank you." Evelyn shrugged. "Just do your job well, and we'll call it even." Jason exhaled, running a hand over his face. This was happening. This was real. Skye tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, do we really get to stay here?" Jason knelt down, brushing her curls from her face. "Yeah, Peanut. We do." Tears welled in her eyes before she flung herself into his arms. "I knew something good would happen." Jason held her tightly, his throat burning. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Evelyn gave them a moment before clearing her throat. "Get settled. I'll have my assistant bring you some essentials." "And Jason?" He looked up at her. "Welcome to the team." Jason nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "Thank you." As Evelyn walked away, Jason sat on the couch, pulling Skye onto his lap. For the first time in years, they weren't just surviving. They had a home. And maybe, just maybe, things were finally turning around. A new routine, a new life. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the guest house, casting soft golden hues across the small but cozy space. For the first time in over 2 years, Jason woke up in a real bed, one that didn't creak under his weight, one that wasn't wedged between strangers in a crowded shelter. He turned his head to the side and saw Skye still asleep, curled up with the stuffed bear Evelyn had left for her. Her breathing was soft and steady, her small hands clutching the blanket. It was the most peaceful he had seen her in months. Jason ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. This still didn't feel real. The first morning. He got up quietly, trying not to wake Skye, and stretched. His back didn't ache like it usually did, another reminder of how different things were now. He walked into the kitchen, opening the fridge out of habit, expecting to see nothing but emptiness. Instead, he was greeted by neatly stocked shelves filled with eggs, milk, fresh fruit, and a loaf of bread. On the counter, a fresh bag of coffee sat next to a brand new coffee maker. Jason swallowed hard. He wasn't used to generosity like this. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find a sharply dressed woman holding a tablet. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she said with a professional smile. "My name is Angela. I'm Evelyn's assistant. I'm here to go over your employment details and schedule." Jason blinked, still adjusting to how fast things were moving. Yeah. Come in." Angela stepped inside, glancing around with approval. "I trust you and your daughter found everything to your liking?" Jason nodded. "More than we could have ever asked for." Angela smiled. "Good. Evelyn takes care of the people she trusts." She set the tablet on the counter and turned it toward him. "Now, let's go over your responsibilities." "The job." Jason sat down, listening as Angela explained his role. "As Evelyn's personal driver, your job is straightforward," she said. "You'll be responsible for transporting her to and from business meetings, events, and any personal errands she needs. Some days will be light, others long, depending on her schedule." Jason nodded. He could handle that. "You'll also have access to a company vehicle, a luxury sedan that's been prepared for you in the garage. You'll need to keep it maintained, clean, and ready at all times." Jason raised an eyebrow. "A company car?" Angela smiled. Of course. Evelyn insists on professionalism in all aspects. Jason still wasn't used to this kind of treatment. A few days ago, he and Sky were sleeping in a shelter. Now he had a car, a house, and a full-time job. There's also an emergency line. If Evelyn needs you outside regular hours, she'll call. We expect punctuality and discretion at all times. Jason nodded. Understood. Angela tapped a few things on her tablet. Your salary will be deposited bi-weekly into the account we set up for you. And before you ask, yes, Evelyn has already taken care of ensuring everything is set for you and your daughter. Jason's throat tightened. He had never met someone so willing to help without asking for anything in return. Anything else? He asked. Angela gave him a knowing look. Only one thing. Jason frowned. What's that? Angela smiled. You don't owe her anything, Mr. Carter. Just do your job well, and that's all she asks. Jason exhaled. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear that. Angela stood, gathering her tablet. Evelyn will need you to be ready by 9 a.m. sharp. You can take the morning to settle in with your daughter. I'll be back later with additional paperwork. Jason nodded as she left. He sat there for a moment, staring at the tablet screen. A salary. A home. A future. This was real. Settling in. Sky woke up an hour later, rubbing her sleepy eyes. When she saw Jason standing in the kitchen making breakfast, actual breakfast, not just half a granola bar, her face lit up. Daddy, you're cooking? She asked excitedly. Jason chuckled. Yeah, Peanut. We've got eggs and toast today. Sky scrambled to the table, watching in fascination as Jason placed a plate in front of her. Real food, she murmured before taking a huge bite. Jason sat across from her, sipping his coffee, still adjusting to the idea that this was their new life. Guess what? He said after a moment. Sky looked up, her cheeks full. What? I start work today. Her eyes widened. For the nice lady? Jason nodded. Sky grinned. That's awesome, Daddy. Does that mean we're gonna stay here forever? Jason hesitated before answering. I don't know about forever, Peanut. But we're safe now. Sky beamed. I like it here. The bed is so soft. Jason laughed. Yeah, it is, huh? Sky nodded enthusiastically. And I have a bear. I named him Mr. Fuzzy Paws. Jason smirked. That's a great name. Sky giggled, then sobered a little. We don't have to leave, right? Jason reached across the table and took her hand. No, sweetheart. We don't have to leave. The first day on the job. By 8:45 a.m., Jason was dressed in the uniform Angela had provided, a crisp, dark suit with a professional but comfortable fit. He stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing himself. For the first time in years, he looked like someone with a future. Sky tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, you look like a superhero. Jason chuckled. Superhero, huh? She nodded. Yep. Super driver man. Jason scooped her up, spinning her around until she squealed with laughter. I like that one. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jason set Sky down and opened it to find Evelyn standing there, dressed in an elegant business suit, sunglasses perched atop her head. You ready for your first day, Jason? She asked with a smirk. Jason straightened. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn rolled her eyes. Don't call me ma'am. It makes me feel old. Jason smirked. Yes, Evelyn. She nodded approvingly. Good. Your car is in the garage. Let's get going. Jason turned back to Sky. "I'll be back later, Peanut. Be good, okay?" Sky saluted him. "Yes, super driver man." Jason laughed, giving her one last hug before heading out the door. As he slid into the driver's seat of the sleek black sedan waiting for him, Evelyn glanced at him with amusement. "What was that about super driver man?" she asked. Jason chuckled. "Long story." Evelyn smirked. "I like it. Now, let's see if you really know how to drive." Jason started the engine, pulling out of the driveway. As they hit the road, he felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Hope. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. And this was only the beginning, the road to redemption. The city stretched before them as Jason guided the sleek black sedan through the morning traffic. The steering wheel felt smooth beneath his hands, the purr of the engine steady and controlled. It had been years since he had driven anything this nice, but his muscle memory kicked in, making it feel natural. Evelyn sat in the back, scrolling through emails on her tablet. She hadn't said much since they left the estate, which suited Jason fine. He wasn't one for small talk, not when his mind was still trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. A home. A job. A future. It still didn't seem real. The city buildings reflected the morning sunlight, casting long shadows over the streets. Jason glanced in the rearview mirror. Evelyn seemed completely absorbed in her work, her expression unreadable. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. "You're good at this," she said, not looking up. Jason arched an eyebrow. "Driving?" She smirked. "That, and being professional. Most people would have asked 1,000 questions by now. Like why a billionaire needs a personal driver." Jason shrugged. "Your business is your business." Evelyn glanced up from her tablet, studying him for a moment. "You don't strike me as the type to waste words." "Only when necessary," Jason replied, keeping his eyes on the road. She chuckled. "I respect that. A test of trust." They reached the Mercer Industries headquarters, a massive glass skyscraper that towered over the rest of the city. Jason pulled up to the private entrance, smoothly coming to a stop. Evelyn shut her tablet and looked at him. "I'll be inside for about 2 hours. You're free to grab a coffee or take a break, but if I need you sooner, I'll call." Jason nodded. "Understood." She opened the door, but before stepping out, she paused. "One more thing." Jason turned toward her. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "I don't let just anyone into my world, Jason. You helped me when you didn't have to. That says a lot about you. But trust is a two-way street." Jason met her gaze. "I understand." She studied him for a beat longer, then nodded. "Good. See you in 2 hours." With that, she stepped out and disappeared into the building. Jason exhaled. This wasn't just a job, it was a test. And he intended to pass. A voice from the past. Jason decided to stretch his legs and grab a coffee from a nearby cafe. He stepped inside the warm, inviting space, the scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As he waited in line, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Then he heard it. Well, look who it is." Jason froze. That voice. It was familiar, but not in a good way. He turned slowly and found himself face to face with Mike Holloway, an old friend turned rival from his factory days. Mike smirked, arms crossed. He looked the same, grimy, rough around the edges, and always up to no good. "Didn't expect to see you around here, Carter," Mike said, looking him up and down. His eyes landed on Jason's suit. "You clean up nice. What's the deal? Land a gig kissing rich folks' boots?" Jason clenched his jaw. Not interested in whatever you're selling, Mike. Mike chuckled. Oh, come on, don't be like that. I just heard through the grapevine that you've been struggling. He leaned in slightly. Guess someone finally decided to take pity on you. Jason's fists tightened. The old Jason, the one who fought his way through life, would have swung by now. But he had more to lose now. I don't have time for this, Jason muttered, grabbing his coffee. Mike's smirk widened. Oh, but you should. See, I've got a business opportunity. Real money. Easy work. Thought maybe you'd want to get in on it. Jason took a deep breath. He had seen too many men fall into easy money traps, jobs that led to trouble, danger, and regret. I have a job, Jason said firmly. A real one. Mike scoffed. With her? The Ice Queen? Jason's spine straightened. Walk away, Mike. Mike chuckled, shaking his head. Suit yourself. But remember, people like us? We don't get happy endings. Jason watched as Mike sauntered out of the cafe. He took a deep breath, willing his heartbeat to slow. Mike was wrong. He had to be. This time, Jason would get a happy ending. Loyalty and doubt. The 2 hours passed quickly. Jason was back at the car when Evelyn returned. She slid into the back seat, exhaling as she set her tablet aside. Good meeting? Jason asked, pulling out onto the road. Productive, she said, then eyed him in the mirror. You look tense. Jason hesitated. He hadn't planned on mentioning Mike, but something about Evelyn told him she saw everything. Just ran into an old acquaintance, he admitted. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Friend or problem? Jason considered the question. Used to be a friend, he said. Now? A problem. Evelyn nodded as if she understood all too well. People from the past have a way of resurfacing at the worst times, she said. Jason glanced at her in the mirror. Yeah. She smirked, but there was something guarded in her eyes. You have no idea. Jason wanted to ask more, but she had already shifted gears. Turn left up ahead. I need to make one more stop. Jason followed her direction, pushing his thoughts about Mike aside. He had left that life behind. And he wasn't going back. A glimpse into Evelyn's world. The next stop wasn't another business meeting. Jason pulled into a quiet street lined with brownstones, an upscale but cozy neighborhood. Evelyn exited the car, motioning for Jason to follow. Confused, he did. They stopped in front of a modest townhouse. Evelyn hesitated before knocking. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing an older woman, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair and warm but sharp eyes. She took one look at Evelyn and sighed. Took you long enough. Jason blinked in surprise. He had never seen Evelyn hesitate, but now she seemed almost uncertain. Hi, Mom, Evelyn said quietly. Jason's eyes widened. Mom? The older woman folded her arms. Don't just stand there. Come in. Evelyn sighed and stepped inside. Before Jason could follow, the woman turned to him. And you are? Jason Carter, ma'am. She studied him for a long moment, then smirked. You don't call her ma'am, but you call me one. Jason stiffened, then relaxed. Force of habit. The woman chuckled. Well, Jason Carter, if my daughter dragged you here, you must be important. Jason frowned. I'm just her driver. The woman shook her head. No one is just anything. Jason wasn't sure what to say to that. As he stood there, the realization hit him. Evelyn Mercer wasn't just a billionaire. She had secrets, too. And Jason had just stepped into a world more complicated than he ever imagined.